The dusty town of Red Hollow had seen its share of cruel spectacles, but none as haunting as that afternoon when the auction bell clanged through the square, summoning townsfolk like vultures to a feast. The air shimmered with heat and harsh laughter as men gathered around the wooden platform, their boots kicking up clouds of red dust that caught the sunlight like sparks of fire. Upon that platform stood a young woman, Eliza, her wrists shackled, her pale dress torn and streaked with the grime of the road. Once she'd been promised as a bride to a man who'd vanished on her wedding day, leaving her stranded, penniless, and branded as property, to be sold by the same lawmen who had once vowed to protect her. The town called it justice. The truth was uglier. Her hair, the color of burnished wheat, fell across her face as she kept her head low, her voice silent, though her trembling told the story her lips could not. The sheriff called out bids like he was selling a horse. "Who'll take the bride in chains?" he jeered. Laughter echoed low, cruel, endless. Some men threw coins at her feet, others shouted loot offers. But through the sea of faces, one man stood apart, arms crossed over his chest, his hat shadowing his eyes, a tall, rugged rancher named Clayton Reeves. He was known around those parts as the widower who never smiled, the man who spoke little but carried a quiet sorrow like a scar. His wife had died giving birth 3 winters back, leaving behind a son, Jacob, who hadn't spoken a word since. Folks said Clayton's heart had died with his wife, and yet, as he looked at the trembling woman on that stage, something inside him stirred, something he hadn't felt in years, a flicker of compassion, maybe even purpose. The bidding went on, rising like a fever. $3, $4, who'll make it $5? The sheriff barked. Clayton's jaw tightened as the crowd jeered. He saw the terror in Eliza's eyes, the same fear he'd seen in his boys when he'd found him, crying alone by the graveside. Without thinking, he stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. $10, he said, calm but firm. The square went silent. Every head turned. The sheriff blinked, surprised. 10, for her. Clayton nodded once. That's my bid. The men laughed, shouting insults, mocking the lonely fool. But Clayton didn't flinch. He walked up to the platform, tossed his money at the sheriff's boots, and said in a voice that carried the weight of grief and resolve, "Unchain her. My son needs her." Eliza's breath caught as his words sank. And he wasn't buying her as property. He was saving her from damnation. As the chains fell and her wrists were freed, the laughter of the crowd faded into uneasy silence. Clayton took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders, shielding her from their gaze. "You'll ride with me," he said quietly. "You've had enough of this town." And with that, he led her to his horse, the crowd parting before him like dust before the wind. That day, the townsfolk didn't know it, but something extraordinary had begun, a story of redemption, born from the ashes of Shane. The Reeves Ranch sat miles from town, a vast stretch of rolling plains dotted with wildflowers and the quiet hum of solitude. It was a place of ghosts and memories, but for Eliza, it was also the first place she'd felt safe in years. When Clayton brought her there, his son Jacob, barely 6 years old, hid behind the barn, peeking shyly at the stranger his father had brought home. "He doesn't talk much," Clayton explained softly, his voice carrying both affection and sorrow. "Lost his mama young. Ain't said a word since." Eliza knelt down, meeting the boy's eyes, offering him a gentle smile. "That's all right," she whispered. "You don't have to talk right away." She'd been a teacher before. Her life fell apart before betrayal and cruelty had stolen her laughter, and in Jacob's silence, she saw a reflection of her own pain. The days passed slowly, tenderly. She cooked meals, mended fences, sang soft songs by the fire. The house that once echoed with emptiness began to breathe again. Clayton would watch her quietly as she brushed Jacob's hair, or when she stood by the window humming a tune his wife once sang. He tried to fight the feelings that grew within him, gratitude first, then admiration, and slowly, something deeper, something dangerous to a man who had already lost too much. One evening, a storm rolled in fierce and wild. Lightning split the skies. Eliza ran out to gather the laundry before the wind carried it away. But Jacob followed her, frightened by the thunder. When the barn door slammed shut behind them, trapping them inside, the child cried out, a sound Clayton hadn't heard in years. He rushed through the rain, breaking the door open, pulling them both to safety. Jacob clung to Eliza, sobbing, and for the first time, Clayton saw his son speak. "Don't go," the boy whispered to her. Eliza's eyes welled with tears. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. Later that night, as the storm faded, Clayton stood on the porch beside her. "You did something I couldn't," he said quietly. "You gave him back his voice." Eliza smiled faintly. Maybe he just needed to feel safe. Their eyes met his, filled with gratitude, hers with something unspoken. In that moment, the silence between them felt softer, almost sacred. Over the next few weeks, Red Hollow's whispers grew louder. About the rancher who'd bought himself a bride, about the woman in chains now wearing flowers in her hair. But neither Clayton nor Eliza cared. Together they rebuilt not just a home, but something stronger: trust, kindness, and love that didn't demand but healed. One evening, under a sunset painted in gold and crimson, Clayton took her hands in his rough palms and said, "I don't want you here because of what happened. I want you here because you belong." Her voice trembled as she replied, "And I want to stay, because I've finally found a reason to live again." As they stood together, the boy laughed in the yard, chasing the wind, free at last. The man who once carried grief, and the woman who once carried chains, had both found their redemption not through chance, but through the quiet courage to care. Subscribe to Old West Stories for more heart-touching tales of love, redemption, and courage from the untamed frontier. Every story is a journey back to when honor was tested, and hearts were forged in dust and fire. Don't miss the next one. Hit that subscribe button and ride with us through the legends of the Old West.